Mike Owens here. Today I'm joined by the legend, Randy the Natural Couture. Randy, always a pleasure to sit down and chat. How are things with you today?
Very good, man. Thanks for having me on again. Appreciate you.
I think the last time we spoke, you were telling me that your partner was in a kind of government race or for a government role, if memory serves. How is that
Oh,
going?
has it been that long?
We probably
Yeah,
spoke since, but that was one thing I do
yeah,
remember.
yeah. She ran twice since I'm not sure if it was the second time she ran or the first time she ran,
Mm.
but she's run twice. He wasn't successful in either campaign, but she definitely shined a light on some of the corruption and some of the BS that's going on in this country right now politically. I don't really want to open that whole can of worms, but yes, she ran for office. She ran for a congressional seat in the district that we live in. First time as a Republican, in the GOP. That didn't go very well. And then the second, she changed parties to a Libertarian party here, and she ran as a Libertarian the second time. Unsuccessful again the second time, but she still made some waves. Certainly made a lot of things public about how the system is a bit off track. Let's just put it that way.
I thought we would start our chat with something a little bit different. So congratulations. I know they never obviously never got the result, but congratulations and wish you the best of luck with any future endeavours. Your reflection on the first round of the PFL tournament. We've obviously just come off PFL 3, but give me your overall assessment.
Man, amazing season. A bunch of incredible athletes, a bunch of great fights. The finish rate this season so far has been ridiculous. I mean, the log jam at light heavyweight is remarkable, honestly. And I think we're got to be close to or over an 80% finish rate this season.
Mm.
And on paper, you look at the names and the matchups, and like these are not lopsided matchups. So these guys have been going out and really getting after it, putting it on the line, and doing exactly what this format forces you to do, which is score points to make it to the playoffs and ensure that you get through the regular season and have a crack at that title. You've got to let it hang out. And all of them have been doing that this season so far. I'm very, very impressed with Dakota Ditcheva coming off her first championship at the PFL Europe and this in stellar fashion, letting those long range weapons go, showing that Muay Thai prowess. Nobody's really tested her yet on the ground. I'm excited to see somebody do that. And there's certainly some girls in the field that have that capability to see what she's got and get her on the ground and see how she survives there. But man, I've been impressed with her.
100%. I was going to ask you who you've been most impressed by, so you read my mind and asked my next question for me, Randy. I did want to ask though, because obviously the acquisition of Bellator, and we've now seen a lot the addition of the ex-Bellator fighters into the PFL tournaments. How much do you think that has improved the overall quality of the tournaments?
I think it's improved it a lot. There's some marquee names there. You get a champ like Liz Carmouche putting her belt on the line and bring it into the regular season because she wants the challenge. At what is she, 44? I mean, she's an older athlete and she looks phenomenal. She looks great. She's been a warrior for a long, long time. So Scott Coker did an amazing job with the brand of Bellator and building a lot of great fighters up. Brian Bader, Nemkov. I mean, on down the line, there's a ton of, Johnny Elvin. We saw Johnny Elvin in the gym yesterday. He's been training a little bit here at Extreme Couture. And first time I met him was face to face was in Saudi for the champs versus champs fight with Impa Kasanganay. And what an amazing fight that was. Holy hell, what a battle. So, yeah, I think it definitely upped the level of competition that we have in the PFL roster, infusing those Bellator athletes. And I think you're going to see some more of those plug into PFL Europe. Probably some more of those plug into PFL MENA, the Middle East, North African region that we just launched this year as well. Next year with Latin America and Australia coming online, there's another opportunity for more athletes to get into the mix here in the PFL.
There's been a lot said online. You mentioned there about the PFL and obviously the Bellator Champion Series and everything that's going on. There's been a lot said online about should the brand fully merge or should Bellator still be kept as its own separate entity. I'm wondering where you stand on that because there is certainly a debate online about what would be best for the overall health of the organization.
Well, I think what they're doing is very unique and interesting. They're keeping Bellator intact and keeping those pay-per-views that they in the marketplaces where Bellator had great success. That were they in Ireland coming up, and we're going to Sioux Falls, South Dakota in the second half of the regular season because that was a big market for Bellator. So they're strategically looking at the numbers that Bellator put up in the years that they were in existence. They want to capitalize off of that. I mean, why else absorb the brand? and keep that highest level, the champions versus champions pay-per-view, and that pay-per-view model in Bellator, I think is the goal. So I don't think the brand's going anywhere. I think they've absorbed it in a unique fashion, not to dispel it and get rid of the brand, but to keep it in place and keep growing it. So very interesting and very unique. When they first bought it, or I heard that they were buying it, I was scratching my head. I was like, I don't understand. Is it just about those 210 fighters? And they had a completely different agenda, and to keep Bellator intact and keep it at that higher pay-per-view level and use those marquee names to continue to promote it and grow it and use the brand, because it's a very, very strong brand, in my opinion.
Yeah, 100%. I suppose the final piece of the puzzle that we don't really know what will happen next with is the super fights division. I mean, I spoke with Shane Burgos on Monday, and he said that he's been told that he's waiting for the super fight division. He's just waiting for a fight and dates and all of that. What do you expect from that overall? And can you give us any idea of what you would expect as some maybe potential?
I think the champions versus champions fight that we had in Riyadh is a preview of what these super fight championships, these Bellator, these fights are going to be like. And Shane Burgos is a perfect candidate. He's an amazing fighter. He brings it every single time he steps up in that cage. That's the type of guy that people will pay a pay-per-view fee to watch fight. But stack a bunch of those fights like that, like the champions versus champions card. And those are some amazing fights that night. And I think that's the preview for what's coming with guys like Shane Burgos.
The previous face of PFL, let's say Kayla Harrison, has obviously made waves with her move over to the UFC and a fantastic debut against Holly Holm. Obviously, we've had multiple conversations, and I know how highly you think of Kayla. So just your reaction to her UFC debut against Holly Holm last month.
Well, first of all, she did it absolutely right. I wasn't surprised when she made the change, because at the end of the day, she's trying to establish a legacy as the best female fighter in the sport. And so at some point, she's probably going to have to go fight in the UFC, because they're the elephant in the room. They're still the biggest promotion, 650 fighters to that roster. The most recognizable and most well-known name in the sport, for a reason. They've been around the longest, and they've done an amazing job, and they're a marketing machine. So I wasn't surprised by the change. And I thought Holly Holm was the perfect person to introduce Kayla to the UFC. I mean, obviously after beating Ronda the way she did, it made a lot of sense for that matchup. And Kayla went out and did exactly what we expected Ronda to do, to be quite honest, when they made that matchup the first time around. Kayla went out and executed it. She put her exactly where she needed to be. She made her wrestler her as much as she could, and submitted her. So, and don't get me wrong, I'm a fan of Holly. I think Holly's an amazing representative of this sport and everything that this sport, certainly on the female side of the house, encompasses. So I'm a fan of Holly Holm. She's an amazing competitor. So Kayla did it exactly right and looked incredible at 135. Holy crap. That physique was just shredded at 135. I'm happy that she's a smart gal. She's very diligent. What was it? Just 8 short years ago, she was just thinking about making the transition to MMA. So look how far she's come with that mindset, that martial arts judo mindset, checking her ego, putting herself in some uncomfortable places and uncomfortable positions, and getting it done. So that's exactly the way it's done right there.
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't agree more. Talking about past fights to future fights, I'm sure you're getting this question a lot. Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson. Your emotions on what is a freak show in many ways, a very strange fight, a fight that I don't think many people expected. Give me your assessment.
Yeah, I think Mike says it best. It's just an indication of what's been going on in boxing now for a little while. These thrillers and crossover matches that Jake, in many ways, Jake and Logan have instigated a bunch of this stuff. And I don't think Mike thinks I don't think he likes it all that much for boxing, for pure boxing. And his rhetoric and his statements about that, we got to straighten this out, and I'm the guy to step up and do it. I mean, look at the training footage. That pop is still there. That explosive speed and power is still there. I think this, obviously he's still a 58-year-old Mike Tyson, but he's still got it, in my opinion. And so that bodes well for going out, and this probably ending within the first or second round. And the longer it goes, just like when Mike was in his prime, the longer it went, the questions started arising. All right, how's the conditioning going to be? How's his mindset going to be getting into those later rounds? Because he traditionally didn't do as well the longer the fight went. But I think he's out to prove a point. I think he's out to set it straight. Commend Jake Paul for being willing to literally step in there with an icon in the sport and one of the most vicious knockout artists the sport has ever seen. That is balls the size of church bells, in my opinion.
Yeah.
There are not a lot of people that are going to be willing to get in the ring, even at 58 with Mike Tyson. I like that Jake has backed it up. I don't think I think he's in trouble with this one. I think unless the fix is in, which I don't even want to say that because I don't think that's true. I don't think Mike would do that.
No.
I see Mike going out there and tearing him up in probably under 2 rounds. And again, commend Jake for getting in there. Commend Jake for continuing to poke Dana White and the powers that be about fighter pay and all the other things that need to change in our sport that people need to be aware of. And all those guys that made those crossover matches from MMA made more money in those single boxing matches than they've ever made in the sport of mixed martial arts. And that's an issue. And thanks for Jake Paul to pointing that out, because we've certainly been trying for years to highlight that. Jake has the platform to use that megaphone to spread that word loud and clear.
Perfect segue into my next question, I suppose, because since the last time we spoke, we've obviously seen the settlement of the class action lawsuit against the UFC. Just your reaction to that news, and do you think any overall change has been made over that process of that class action lawsuit?
There it is right there. I mean, that's the elephant in the room. This is a 10-year process with 3 of the biggest law firms in the industry pursuing this class action. And the real goal wasn't about funds and money. Yes, money was the main issue, but the real goal was injunctive relief, force them to change the way they have to do business, create transparency in the sport, alleviate these very restrictive contracts, make them have to disclose how much money they make off any given show, so a fighter has a fair chance of negotiating his fair value in the marketplace. I don't see that injunctive relief. We're still waiting for it all to be stamped and approved, but a settlement has been reached. $335 million at face value looks like a win, certainly a win for the fighters. But if you look at what TKO is actually worth, $8 or $9 billion, $335 million is a slap on the hand financially. And that's the truth of the matter. We really needed that injunctive relief that forced them to change the way they do business. And I don't see that in this. So at the end of the day, I don't know that we accomplished what we set out to accomplish, but it's still a victory. We're still raised, it was across, on every newspaper across the country. People know there's an issue here now, at least. And again, Jake Paul's been part of this process too, of getting the word out, because the powers that be just want to poke the fighters in the chest and, oh, you're just being spoiled brats. You get paid too much as it is. That's not true, and it's not fair. Show me another professional sport in our society where at least 50% of the revenue coming in off those events doesn't go to the athletes that fought and competed in those events. Yeah. That's the standard across the board. It's about 20%. Their goal is to keep it under 20%, and they do a very good job at that, at 13 to 15%. So that's the real issue. We need transparency in our sport, and the structure has to change. That's the beauty of the PFL. The structure doesn't really matter. It's up to the fighter to go up and score criteria points and get into that playoff and have a shot at that championship. There's no rankings. It's up to the fighter to score criteria points. In traditional prize fighting, they set rankings to determine who gets a crack at that title next, and they don't abide by them because the promoter is the same guy that's setting those rankings. That's a structural problem in our sport. And that's too much power for one guy to have. And why did Conor McGregor get from 6th rank get a crack at that title? Because he was willing to play the game and run his head and do the publicity stunts and all the other stuff. That's the state of the affairs here. We have a structural problem in our sport, and there's no transparency in our sport. We have to figure out how to change that.
So I suppose moving full circle back to PFL, PFL markets itself now as the co-leader with the UFC. So my question to you is, what do you think are the next steps for PFL in order to become the market leader in MMA?
I think absorbing Bellator, handling that the way they've handled that, creating that top tier, the pay-per-view models, those champs versus champs fights, and like you were talking about, Shane Burgos now going to be in a super fight on one of those bigger. That's the top tier. The global is the next. That's where I'm working. That regular season, those top level champs. That's where Kayla came out of to transition to the UFC, and now we're seeing these regional promotions in the PFL. PFL Europe launched last year, had their first champion. Dakota Ditcheva came out of that. Now she's in the global. She's moved up. She's in the global level. Mina just started this year. We're going to see athletes after this first Mina season do the same thing. They're going to win that Mina championship and get the nod to move up to that global level. And I think next year, I think you're going to see Latin America and Australia come online as two more regional feeders to that global mid-tier level. And all those champs like Kayla, she went to the UFC. A lot of those champs like Shane Burgos and others are going to transition into that pay-per-view model at the top level, the top umbrella in the PFL Professional Fighters League. And that's where Bellator is going to continue to survive, flourish, and live.
Last one from me, Randy, and as always, I appreciate your time. We spoke off camera and I got to spend some time in Extreme Couture and obviously cover and watch UFC 300. There's been a lot of debate about Max Holloway's last second KO over Justin Gaethje. Is it the best knockout in MMA history? So my question to you is, what are your top 5 knockouts in MMA history?
Well, definitely in the top of that is going to be Dan Henderson and Michael. Obviously, I'm a little too close to that one, but that was an amazing. That KO was ridiculous. Max Holloway's performance and Justin Gaethje's, those are two amazing warriors and very fitting for the BMF belt. Let's be honest, that was an incredible fight. Both those guys lay it on the line every single time they walk up into that cage, and it's amazing. Hard pressed to come up with three more knockouts that stick out. There's so many amazing ones out there, but gosh, I don't know if I could come up or just off the top of my head name 3 more, but those 2 immediately come to mind for sure. And the other one just happened a couple of weeks ago, but that was an incredible. I mean, literally, he could have been the one tasting the canvas there, and by most scorecards, he was in the lead.
Yeah.
So to call him out with 30 seconds left and say, right here, let's go. I mean, that's legendary, and that's never going to change. The warrior spirit in both those guys is remarkable.
100%. I think that's the best place for us to end. Randy, it truly is always a pleasure catching up. I really enjoy these chats. It was great to see you, Jim, last month. I got to see some of the guys, and always good catching up and look forward to the next one.
You bet, man. Be well. Take care.